Magic. It's a good subject to discuss, especially right now in a time period where we have a chance to bridge the gap and have a better world, as long as there's not a lot of misunderstandings and people making miscalculations, or web trap setting is how I describe it. So magic, or witches, shamans, Sufis, brujas, kahinas. There's many different terms to describe what someone is or could be considered when they have what others perceive as magic ability or supernatural ability or powers. In my life, when I was young, I never really practiced witchcraft or magic. I went about my life and had good intentions. I could communicate very easily with land, animal, plant, spirit. I was very connected to everything around me. That's part of my bloodline, but it's also part of my spirit and soul and who I am. As I got older, there was some craze with witches because, of course, there's movies growing up where there's always a witch, but I was always kind of freaked out by the ones like in the, what is the Halloween one that everybody loves? Hocus Pocus, right? Those witches are scary. They want to come and like scare children, but they're funny, so you're watching them. It's like enjoyable to see. But if you think about what they were said to do, it's scary. But again, not every person practicing witchcraft has good intentions. Similarly to how not every person who is a Sufi has good intentions, or every person who is a shaman doesn't have good intentions. Every person who is a kahina doesn't have good intentions. And every person with any type of professional ability or that's just a human being doesn't have good intentions. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are labeled as or what others label you as or what you label for yourself. It's a matter of what your intentions are. As I got a little bit older, I started to go to some magical stores. There were a few of my favorites in Maine, Enchantments in Boothbay Harbor. That was my favorite store. You walk in, there's glitter on the floor, there's like magical things for anybody and everybody. It's like super magical place. I love it. I bought a cup, a chalice there that was blue with a cat on it. I bought my first athame, which is a Persian blade that I chose. In witches or witchcraft, they choose usually to have a very specific blade that is double-edged and pointed. Otherwise, it's not considered a traditional witchcraft athame, but I chose a Persian blade when I was in my early 20s, before 2008. And then, of course, cauldron, which you can burn intentions in. I had a crystal ball at one point. I had many wands. I had a whole altar of things that are magical. I had lots of feathers that I collected over my lifetime. Lots of rocks that I connected over my lifetime. And I had deities that I had up as well. I had an ancestor wall. And I loved candle magic because it's a really simple way with always good intention. So I was taught that black candles will help absorb any negative energy in the space. And as the candle burns down, it will help dissipate those energies and send them to light or to the ether. I was taught that if you write letters to people that you can't communicate with or that are dead, and you burn them in a safe place, like by the sea or in a cauldron or in a pot or somewhere that's safe, that you can send those messages to the ether and that they will return to the person the way that they need to be received, whether they're walking this earth or in another place. Other color candles you can use, I love Danica candles, which is also a place in my home, Maine. And they have sales that they put on, but they make all of their own candles. They're really amazing. So I used to get all of my candles from there and keep them in my little magic trunk. And then you can carve them with different things. You can use your athame, you can use your hands, your nails, you can use a nail, you can use whatever you need to. So getting into magic, I never really had a specific outline of how I practiced magic, and I did what I called energy spells. Now that meant that I sent my energy from my location and radiated it out from my being, imagining it surrounding my place in space, my town, my county, my state, my country, and then the whole world, and then out to the universe, kind of like sonar with bats, right? You can see their sonar representation of how it beams out like that. Kind of like that, but across the whole universe in like a... And then imagine putting up walls of protection or different colors of light, the rainbow scale, depending on what is needed and what is necessary. Sending it to individuals in that same way can be beneficial as well. These are things that I always did. When I did energy spells for magic, it was always imagining what was right for me. Again, when I use the representations, the difference between this cup and a cup. So when you try to manifest this cup, it would be haram magic. But if you're trying to manifest a cup that's right for you, it is halal. That's the difference. So similarly to love magic, you're not ever trying to get someone individually or specifically to love you. If you're doing love magic, it's really important that you're not imagining anyone. You're only asking for the person right for you. The difference between this cup or a cup. That's the best representation that I can give. So it's the same with everything, with a job, with any materialistic item, with a person, with a place, with a goal. Never ever try to manifest things that are not yours, and never try to do magic that's considered bad magic or manipulative magic for what others have. That's what caused people a lot of chaos back in my home and caused them to call me a witch, a bad witch. But I was never a bad witch. And honestly, I don't know if I was a witch at all. It's hard to say. All I said when I was angry is let it be. And I guess people blamed me for things that happened in their entire lives. But they also didn't thank me for all of the good. So it's kind of bizarre. If they're going to blame me for all of the bad, and all I said is let it be, wouldn't they also thank me for all of the good that they had too? It's kind of strange to look at and to understand. A lot of web traps happened from the place and space that I was and in my country and in other parts of the world that caused such mass chaos to the point where instead of having an evolved world like we were meant to right now, we have this design that's kind of propelled us back into Hell Planet, where people think that this earth is a game, but it's not a game. Something I think that's beneficial for everyone who has what is considered magical powers or supernatural powers. It's why Sufis are put on a watch list, because they just don't understand how things happen when they're around. But something I would recommend, and one of the reasons I believe that Sufis don't typically use any type of items, is because they have the knowledge that everything is within them, and also because then they can't be called a bad witch, right? So in this time period of my life, when I was pretty young, I had different representations of magical items and tools, including a tarot deck that was gifted to me when I was 19 in 2005, and I began doing tarot readings. I started doing them publicly in 2009 for free, and I had a lot of fun with that. I gave people an intuitive reading, and then I wrote down what the reading was with the book meaning, so that when people interpreted them, they could do so from their own slate being clean. That way they didn't have to, they could remember what I said intuitively, but then they had a book meaning to kind of base their own decided logic and energies off of, so that they didn't gravitate too much towards that intuitive reading, because that was in the moment what they needed to hear, and everything forward moving would have been what they perceived as necessary. I had people years later tell me that they were grateful and that I was accurate and that it helped them, which made me really happy. There are certain things that I won't speak on when people ask me if I'm doing an astrology reading or a tarot reading. I won't answer specific things because I believe that it can hinder someone's life too greatly and be detrimental to them. So there's certain things that I just won't actually talk about. Similar to how if you have a lot of psychic visions and dreams, it's really important to not allow them to influence you or another person too much, because based on decisions that everybody makes, things can go in different directions the way that they're meant to. So I don't want to influence anyone, especially if they're not in my life in a way that I've seen them in my life in a dream. It's really important for there to be a distinction between the right things to say to people. You know, every single dream and vision that I have, actually quite a lot of them are incredibly psychic, but there needs to be room for understanding. People change. They make decisions and their paths change, and so too can yours. It's an understanding of being mature. Now, when I was 23, I sent a message in a bottle, in a Bailey's bottle, a little tiny Bailey's bottle. This is back when I actually, I drank back then. Only socially. I hardly ever drank alone. And I drank whiskey on the boat, which was my pretty normal drink. I had a scotch. And I got heartburn, but I thought it was seasickness. So I went to the front of the bow of the boat and I draped myself like on the bow of the boat and just rocked with the boat. And I was like, oh, I feel so much better now. And the captain was like, well, then you don't have seasickness. So I found out it was just heartburn from the scotch that I drank. And I drank Bailey's instead because I was with a bunch of guys that were drinking. And I was like, well, I kind of want to like have a drink too. So I got some Bailey's and had some Bailey's as the drink. And then it was this tiny little bottle, and I had some pretty magical experiences without any magical tools with me, so I wrote about it. So this is when I really realized that the representations are fun, and they're necessary and important, especially when you're beginning, or when you just want something to, like having a wand is fun, using incense to put a circle around you is fun, having a crystal ball is fun. Having a chalice that's special and sacred is fun. Having a cauldron to burn things in is fun. There's all of these representations that you use that are fun to use, and they shouldn't be considered threatening. It's not a threatening thing. So when I was on that boat, right off, something happened where we were going to need to dock and go to shore for days at a time because something got stuck in the motor. And I just went downstairs and I sat in meditation and I asked the universe, God, Great Spirit, to allow it to be mediated quickly. And then we ended up going over to a dock where a man happened to be a diver. He was able to go down and remove that, and then we went on our way. There was another situation where there was a tide issue that typically when we went through the tides, this was a dangerous passing that caused a lot of shipwrecks, and we were going through it at a bad tide. So I asked the universe to help, and the tides changed. And I remember when I went back aboard, one of the men whose wives did Reiki and was very similar to me, he said it's the damnedest thing that the tides changed like that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's so weird. So I didn't really say anything about it. So I wrote about it in my message in a bottle, and I wrote about how it felt to have realized that all of the utilization of tools is more fun, but that, realizing that the magic that you have and need is within you, within God, within the Great Spirit, within the universe, whatever you call it, to connect to. And if you want to be an atheist, the world needs black holes too, so it doesn't really matter if you don't believe in anything. You're allowed to have that freedom. It's free will. So essentially, that was a pretty magical year for me, the summer of 2009. It was the summer that it rained like nonstop, and then I got my license back. I never had an OUI. I had operating after suspension, which means I drove a motor vehicle without a valid license. And when I got my license back, I just drove and sang, and I was so happy. That was my driving and singing is like my way of getting my emotions out. Before spinal cord injury, afterwards, driving is not so comfortable for me. So it's a lot of the things I really loved have been changed. I've needed to find new ways to outlet my energy other than running mountains and singing in cars. So it has not been easy because that was like two of my main ways of dealing with my emotions at all times. If something is wrong, go for a run or go for a drive and sing. When you have a spinal cord injury, you can't really do either. You have to come up with new ways of dealing with your frustration and anger. Now, of course, when I went home, I had all of my magical representations, magical tools again. And whenever I started dating someone, I would always play up that I was a witch. I would always be like, I'm a super witch, like I'm so witchy. Because I wanted to scare them away just so that it saved me from being with anyone who's going to be mean to me about my spiritual practices. Similarly to how if you're Muslim or any type of religion that people consider taboo, they aren't very supportive of your practices, and they don't support who you are as an individual. And if they take that connection away from you, they're not worth it. So for me, it was something that I always really it made a much bigger deal out of than I actually was. I never went into that I did energy spells or that, I never did any haram magic. It was always a little bit different. So I ended up signing up for witchcraft school, which I've talked about in the past, when I was 30 on my 30th birthday. And the class started when I was 30 and a half, so the September of the year that I turned 30 in 2016. And I participated in that for almost 4 years. Actually, it was over 4 years because there's a 6-month break in between. So I treated that very seriously, and I was very devoted to it. I really liked the school, and I gained a lot of awesome wisdom and experience from it, on top of the already very beautiful practice that I already had in my own life. I'm a born shaman woman, so that's helpful and beneficial. The Great Spirit walks within my body, so that's always beneficial. And I had a lot of my own intuitive practices that were really powerful and strong. But this gave me a different path and a different level of experience and understanding. When I studied yoga, I remember feeling like, oh, I've already done this before. And when I studied different things, I felt like, oh, I've already done this before. It feels familiar, but it's really powerful too. One thing I never did is call myself a witch. I never really said I am a witch regularly. People called me one a lot. I guess. I was not realizing that people were thinking I was a witch long before I would have ever called myself one. So through witchcraft school, I gained a lot of wisdom and insight, and I really enjoyed my practices. I have very beautiful visuals when I do my shamanic meditations or any type of witchcraft meditation or journey meditation, which for me doesn't include any drugs. So when I say I'm doing a shaman meditation, for me it means I put on a drumming soundtrack and then I do my necessary meditation, which I can share at some point or direct you to places that can share them. When you are a born shaman, it's a little bit different. You naturally access that. I participated in a shaman workshop with another woman, and she was like, wow, like your visuals are amazing, and it's because I was already a well established shaman woman. I already had all of that within me, and already had a very strong spiritual practice that I didn't share with many people, because people become very strange and competitive when you share your practices with them. Specifically, there was a woman who pretended to be my friend that was very dangerous for me. And she was very jealous of the fact that I always found feathers, that I was so connected spiritually, that I had a lot of visions. And she tried to become me, which she admitted to me, which was very alarming because you should never try to be anyone but yourself. So that was something that was a valuable lesson for me too, and also is probably why a lot of magical practitioners and sheikhs tell you not to share your experiences with others, because they can become very jealous and hateful towards you, which can be detrimental to you because they could be practicing bad magic or could hire someone to do bad magic for them, because it does exist in the world. In the past, before fall of 2020, people were able to harness the energy for magical tools, magical places and spaces, places that were built on purpose to harness people's energy and power, but I removed that from the world, so now no one can do that. No one can be controlled by a magical tool or a place or a space. Everybody is set free now. So there's no need to fear those items any longer, or those spaces and places any longer. Manipulation magic can still occur, but at the detriment of those that do it. My 4th year of witchcraft school, when we were studying the Kabbalah, we got to the lesson of Tiferet, and I had already traveled the Kabbalah or reached Kether. I am not a Jewish woman. My family lineage, as far as I know, my grandmother's side, on my dad's family, is not Jewish, but my mother's side may be. We have a blended family, a mixed race family. Again, I posted about that in my ancestral working, but my ancestors are from the world. Literally, there's someone from all over the world. And I'm very indigenous and very connected to the earth and the universe. So calling it the Kabbalah is the easiest thing. Sufis have their own variation, I believe. I don't know what they call it. But I had already reached Kether, or the crown, or ascension, Mahatma, before that. When I was in Thailand working with elephants, the Mahut that I worked with would always say Mahatma. Like, I would sit in meditation and I would be there. When I went to study yoga, I already knew how to reach Mahatma. I was already there. It was easy for me. At 23 in 2009, if I was stressed out, all I needed to do is take a deep breath, put my palms together, and breathe out, and I could reset my entire body. It was part of my nature, and I wasn't always that way. And when I'm in a situation or an environment that's very triggering, because I'm a human being, I can also have reactions and responses that are not desirable or beautiful. I'm human. I do my best. When I mentioned in Tiferet that fire to water was Allah, it had a visceral response from my teacher assistant and caused me to get kicked out of witchcraft school. I was also participating in Sufi practices, and people around me were having very visceral responses to that. I was part of a Sufi group, or I'm not sure if I'm part of it. I participate in it. I don't know what makes you a part of it or not. So until I know that, I can't say for sure if I am part of a Sufi group. But I can say that I participated in the practices, saw great benefit in them, have great respect for them, and definitely align with having a Sufi soul, which is what I started to explain when I started to do those practices and learn about it, is that, oh, I have a Muslim heart and a Sufi soul. That's how I explained it. Now, in the area of the world that I lived and that I've lived my whole life, when you are participating in a Sufi group in the way that I was, where people are from all over the world and there is a sheikh involved and you're participating in the retreats and you're having spiritual awakenings like I have, it made people very scared because of the fear of Islam. People around me predominantly white people around me were very scared. I did a workshop in which I sang La ilaha illallah in the beginning of February of 2021 in a high-pitched voice in harmony with other people that were singing it. And I had an awakening, but that awakening scared many people around me. Then I was wrongfully exploited, called a bad witch, blamed for anything bad that happened in people's lives, and it became a New Age witch hunt and was pretty uncomfortable for me because I was dying from blunt force trauma to the spine by the man that I had been in a relationship with before, because he could sense me coming into my power when I was, participating in my witchcraft school and at the age and the time period. And I had just gone through 3 shoulder surgeries, and those shoulder surgeries caused me to have a lot of time to reflect. I was already in isolation, I was already alone, and I was already kind of like removed from the world for years before the pandemic hit. So I had a lot of time to reflect on what it was that I wanted in my life and what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to live. And his daughter was older, who I took care of, so she was old enough for her mom and dad to be the ones who could get her in other time periods. I was like, all right, well, now it's time for me to get to focus on myself. I'm her other parent. I'm not her biological parent, so I deserve to be able to focus on myself now after what I had just experienced. And then he crippled me. So I was going through a lot that I was holding and not speaking on because I was trying to move forward and accomplish the goals that I wanted to accomplish in my life without focusing on how horrific the injury that I had was, because I believed I could heal and I wanted to heal fully. I wanted to heal fully. I wanted to run mountains. I wanted to dance. I wanted to live how I lived, the week before he did it to me. So after this awakening that I had, which was after an awakening, after an awakening, after a lifetime of an awakening, because any person who's actually had an awakening or reached Mahatma knows that in your life, you have to consistently reach that level again and again. It's not something that you reach and then you're like, well, I'm good. Now I have to do nothing. It's that you constantly, as a human being and in this world, have to keep on accessing, understanding, and reaching and working towards as long as you're alive on the earth. You can't just say, well, I reached it once. If that was the case, then when I was a child, I would have just sat back and done nothing else with my entire life. Well, I reached Mahatma, I quit. Then God would have taken me from the earth, which would have been preferable for me. Honestly. But here I am still. So I think that one of the recommendations I have for everyone is to use no magical tools at some point if you've never had that experience yet. To try many pathways. My witchcraft school is a halal witchcraft school. There are just members of it that are haram, who can cause damage and harm and gang up on you, but the school itself is halal. The Sufi group I'm a part of is halal. It's the yogic school that I was a part of is halal. No matter how many people ganged up on me, I have the ability to be forgiving. The right people will know who I'm talking to when I say that. There are lots of things that you can do and lots of avenues and paths that you can take to reach that ascension and understanding of your purpose on the earth. You're part of the earth and you're part of the universe. I think that when it comes to using the word witch, there's too much pain and suffering and hatred that comes along with it, too much taboo and misunderstanding. And when I began working with my ancestors really powerfully, they came through. I had an Algerian Irish woman come through, a Yoruban Scottish woman come through. I had an Amazigh woman who I believe was Algerian, so she could have been the Algerian Irish woman. She was seafaring, so she arrived in Ireland in that way. My Yoruban Scottish ancestor was very powerful as well. She got taken from her land because they knew she was a queen in that country, so they took her for that reason, to take her power. She's the ancestor I speak on that told me that she was not a woman but a goddess. She was very specific about that she was a goddess, not a woman. And she cursed when she left the earth because of the way that they forced her to leave the earth by burning her, calling her a bad witch, after they took her lineage and took her bloodline to produce my ancestry and many others. That was what my working was on this earth too, was to change that, to alter that lineage, to make sure that the lineage that is born of me, if there is one, if I choose to bring children into this world, if I meet a man who they would like to incarnate to as their father. I'm an older woman, I'm almost 38, so it's not something that I'm going to rush either, ever. But that lineage will not be cursed. That lineage will not have the same type of pain that is held in my body and blood and the body and blood of many others. Because everyone is free. Except for the web trap setters. They know who they are. They can either have accountability and change, or they can continue to try to play Earth like a game and then have an eternity in hell. I don't care. Another ancestor that came through that was very powerful was my Chinese ancestor, the last name of Lang. I'm unsure of who her husband was. He's not a Spanish man. Again, the Yoruban woman, it was a Scottish man or a Spanish man. I believe he brought her, I believe what happened is it was a Spanish man who took her, and then she ended up on an island, and then that family member ended up in Scotland, perhaps. I'll have to do a meditation and ask. These are things that ancestry tests don't want you to know about because they fear losing your money. If you all of a sudden everybody starts to meditate and realize how powerful they can be when they connect to their ancestors, a lot of places that make money fear what will happen to them because they don't understand that everything here has a place. You know, there's a reason for it, except for human trafficking, mass killing, hunger. There's no reason for that. That's all humans. That's human beings not doing their job. But everything that's been created, it's here. It means that it's necessary, and moving forward, as long as we use the guidelines of halal and haram, with cultural independence, cultural identity, all taken into consideration, then we have a better world automatically, because it's actually founded on human principles and not principles that are made up by humans who want to rule the world because they forgot it has one ruler and one governing force, which is the Great Spirit, God, Allah, the universe. I was pushed away from my home. People said I was doing lots of black magic, or ancestral magic is what I called it. Voodoo, hoodoo, they called it. They called it all kinds of things. But all I said when I was angry was let it be. All those times I was shaking my maracas or lighting candle flames or using feathers or doing meditations and magic, that was all halal magic. There was only one magic that I did, which was to enact faster karma upon the man who did this to me, and then a lot of bad magic people ganged up on me, and they tried to make it seem like what he did to me I was doing to myself, and they went through great lengths to silence me. Now their karma, I imagine, will be quite horrific. But don't take my word for it. See for yourselves. Show reference. Now, I guess what is important is to realize that if you look back in time, so this man broke my spine in half, and using only plants and herbs, breath work, magical practice, my connection to the source, mind and material, I healed to the point that I'm at now, which is pretty miraculous. And what I wanted to do is be able to help people in a very simple way and allow people to know what it was that I did to help heal and remove all of the horrific things that I had to go through because of really awful people from that experience, so that they would actually have a chance at maybe even fully healing from an injury like this. But if you look back in time, a lot of the women that were accused of being witches, they said that they moved funny, they stayed on rooftops, they used candle magic, they used all of these things, and to me it just sounds like a woman who was abused by a man who tried to kill her but she lived, and then he tried to erase her because he wanted to make sure he could cover up what he did to her. Similar to how people would burn women at the stake or drown them because they were powerful, independent women that others feared because of their connection to the source. I think of God as within me, but also as my husband. And he is a man in the universe looking out for me. And whatever people do to me, he sees, and he is never judging me, and he is never judging me for my actions or reactions to what people do to me, because he sees the full picture, no matter what people try to make it seem like. And when I meet him on the earth, if he ever walks the earth, we will know and recognize one another, and that will be considered a heavenly ordained spouse, or Allah ordained spouse, God ordained spouse. It means you found the person that you will not only spend your earthly life with faithfully, happily, willingly, and lovingly, but that when you die, you'll be together in heaven, and you'll have a beautiful life and existence, because it doesn't operate off of the same principles as this earth here that is misguided by humans. So instead of saying, why does God let these things happen? It's important to see God doesn't. Human beings do. The Great Spirit, God, Allah, is not letting anything on this earth happen that is haram or bad. People are letting it happen. Whether through complacency, silence, indifference, not knowing, or downright knowing. Human beings are what has made this earth not be operated the way that it's meant to be. This man killed me, and I found out what my God purpose was. And I've been pretty adamant about it and steadfast about it this whole time while I've been trying to heal, while I've been put in really bad situations by people who are haram, who tried to make themselves seem better than they were. And I continue to move forward, desiring to help the most people possible, and also to desire to allow people to see what the earth is supposed to be like in this time period. Again, halal and haram, societal conditions, but with cultural and community and state and country independence on what that means. There's no reason to fear Islam. Many people have been made to fear it for this time period so that when it happened, they would continue to silence and repress it, harm, blame, shame, frame, and kill off the people that were here to help bring you into a time period of evolution in the future. There doesn't need to be war. There doesn't need to be chaos. There doesn't need to be pain. There doesn't need to be confusion. There doesn't need to be jealousy, fear. It doesn't need to be a time period of anything negative. It's supposed to be a time period of easy evolution. And it can be. As long as people that are practicing in haram stop, And again, that's cultural identification of what that is. It's not going to look the same for every country, every state, every community, every space and place, and every individual. Only a person can say what is truly haram for them. If I eat a whole cake today because I'm sad, that's haram cake. If I eat a whole cake today because I'm hungry and it's what I have to eat, maybe it's halal. If I eat it and I just eat it because, maybe it's halal. But if it's something I'm doing to deal with my emotions, then it is haram. That means I have to take accountability for that. If I'm using marijuana as medicine, it's halal. If I'm using it as an escapism, it's haram. If I'm using anything as medicine, it's halal. If I'm using it as escapism, it is haram. If you have cultural practices that allow you to understand the difference, I might not use medicines or herbs to journey, but if others do, they can take agency over whether it's halal or haram. It's generally not for everyone, but it's something that people can partake in as long as they have the understanding of what it does, what it's doing, and what their purpose is. So I think that it's really important when people are using the word witch as a negative word to actually see the fullest picture. Yes, there are bad people in the world, whether they call themselves a witch, a shaman, a Sufi, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Jewish person. There are so many different words that are used to describe individuals, and that has nothing to do with who they are as a person. It's all about their intention. So it's very important for people to understand and realize the difference. I wore black a lot when I was a young person, after I was drugged and raped many times. I used to carry a cat on my arm that I brought to my job and wear stilettos. And I guess I became a little more withdrawn after that happened to me, so people began to call me a witch without asking questions about what happened to me or why I went from wearing so many colors and being so vibrant and being myself. I'm trying to speak up because I'm in a space and place to be able to do so. And I want to help the world understand that this earth is not being operated the way that it's meant to be, and that it is human beings that are choosing that, not anything else in the universe. Because if people were listening to what God wanted, or Allah wanted, or the universe wanted, or the Great Spirit wanted, they would be listening and paying attention. And then we would have a changed world. And it would be better within 24 hours or less. So make sure before you start fearing words that people use to call someone something, that you understand everything, that you fully have heard everything that's needed to hear, and that you can properly actually understand things, because a lot of times things are not what they seem if the wrong people are the ones telling the story, as we all know. What kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of world do you want your children to live in? What kind of world do you want your community and country to have? What kind of world do you want, and do you want to evolve? This earth will no longer be played as a game. Never again. So those that are doing so should have accountability and stop. Because it won't work the same way it has in the past. If you're confused by that sentence, it's not meant for you. Those that know will know. Just like those that know when I say I'm forgiving, they'll know what I mean too. Because a lot of people ganged up on me, but I'm still here.